While not being the most predatory form of a live service game by any means, Helldivers 2 does still follow the live service model. Premium content is added fairly regularly in the form of war bonds, essentially battle passes, that give players new content and a fleeting sense of progression. But often in the time between war bonds, people start to get bored pretty quickly. I got to thinking, what do other multiplayer games have that keep things exciting and keep players returning without the need to constantly introduce new content? Well, PvP. But before you freak out, I'm not saying I want Helldivers 2 to become a PvP game. Instead, I'm thinking of what PvP offers, and that is competition. I don't think people keep coming back to PvP games because they just love killing other people. At least, I hope not. I think it's the competition. To put it bluntly, the feeling you get from proving that you are better than someone else at something is a feeling that people like to pursue. Helldivers 2 could absolutely scratch that itch in players' brains without introducing PvP. How? Competitive Helldives. That sounds kinda goofy though, so I've decided to call this concept Special Operations instead. Before anyone freaks out telling me that turning Helldivers into a competitive game would bring toxicity to the community and change what is a simple, fun horde shooter into a sweatfest of pro gamers, this would be an additional feature just for players looking for a slightly more demanding experience and would have minimal effect on the experience for players that enjoy the game just as it is. And even then, maybe this idea of a more competitive mode is a bad idea for the game. This is just an idea I had recently and something I figured I'd put out there. I'm definitely open to other people's thoughts on why this isn't a good fit for the game. That being said, I think my concept of special operations actually has the potential to bring the Helldivers community together rather than create animosity between players. Anyways, I'm actually going to explain exactly what I have in mind for these special operations, as I'm calling them. Special operations, or SOs for short, would be similar to your typical high difficulty operations consisting of 3 separate missions, with several differences. For one, you wouldn't browse through operations or planets or even factions. When you initiate a special operation, you are presented with a random operation on a random planet, selected from the current active planets, on a random front. This prevents players from cherry-picking the easiest missions they can with the faction they are most comfortable with. This way, players are forced to be adaptable and must be ready to take on anything the game can throw at them. In universe, I think this makes a lot of sense. These special operations are special because they have been deemed critical to complete. Therefore, rather than super destroyers taking on operations at their own discretion, a team of super destroyers carrying some of the most elite Helldivers have been summoned by High Command itself to carry out this operation. All SOs would sort of fall outside the ranking of mission difficulty, from trivial to super Helldive. Instead, special operations would always be at least as difficult as the highest difficulty. Also, players would not be able to join an ongoing SO. Whoever you had with you at the start of the operation are all you get until the end of it. This is just to prevent players from joining ongoing operations in order to climb the ranks more quickly than players that actually do the operation start to finish. Of course, this also means no SOS beacons. While it probably wouldn't be very smart to do, I like the idea of players having the option to do special operations without a full squad. If John Helldiver himself comes along and decides teammates would just slow him down, then why not let him solo the whole operation? Beyond this, actual gameplay would be about the same as normal. Complete the objective before the mission timer runs out, complete any sub-objectives, or wipe out any enemy bases you can along the way. I do have a couple ideas to make things a bit more interesting though. Instead of 40 minutes to complete a mission, special operations would have a mission timer of 30 minutes. If you didn't know, this actually used to be the standard length of missions when the game first came out, but this number was increased by 10 minutes pretty early on. Speaking from experience, I can tell you that 30-minute clock really lights a fire under your ass on higher difficulty missions. This would force squads to play as efficiently as possible and really strategize if they want to clear the whole map. Another idea I have is to reduce the number of reinforcements per squad. Rather than 5 reinforcements per squad member, maybe 3, for a maximum of 12 reinforcements for a full squad without the help of a booster. Not only would this further increase the difficulty, it might actually make people think a bit harder about what boosters they bring, and just think a little harder in general and not Leroy Jenkins into an enemy base without the rest of their team quite as often. Between the shorter mission timer and reduced reinforcement budget, individual missions will either be completed more quickly or lost more quickly. I think this is important for this special operations mode to work because the completion of the entire operation is a lot more important than with standard operations. But 3 mission operations can sometimes take 2 hours or more to fully complete, which is a big time commitment for a single in-game activity. Special operations would hopefully go slightly quicker, maybe an hour and a half at most. So these operations would be more challenging, but what about them as competitive? Well, you know how you get a rating of 1 to 5 stars based on how well your squad did at the end of a mission? Well, that would actually mean something in special operations. Just like a standard operation at high difficulty, there would be 3 separate missions within a special operation. As you complete the missions, the stars shown on the mission review screen accumulate from each mission to give you a final score once the operation is complete, or in other words, once you've finished all 3 missions. So, for a special operation consisting of 3 missions, a maximum score would be 15 stars, 5 from each mission. Just a side note, if a player leaves the squad midway through a special operation, they would receive a score of 0 stars, which would definitely hurt their rank. This is just to prevent players from leaving when the going gets tough. Also, if a player disconnects, they should have the option to rejoin the squad as long as the special operation is still going on. Now, I'm going to be honest, I've never paid much attention to how the star ranking system actually works in the game, but in its current state, I don't think it would be clear-cut enough for players to rely on and could lead to a lot of frustration, with players not knowing what the exact criteria for receiving 5 stars on a mission actually are. So I came up with my own criteria. Players receive no stars if they fail the main objective and the operation is ended prematurely. That's no different than normal. 1 star is awarded for completing the main objective. 1 star is awarded for completing every sub-objective, for example, destroying illegal broadcasts, taking out convoys, extracting with the Terminid sample backpack, and so on. 1 star is awarded for destroying every enemy base. 1 star is awarded for all 4 players extracting, and 1 star is awarded for extracting before the mission timer runs out. At one point, I was considering making extracting without depleting the reinforcement budget part of the criteria to receive a star, but I'm afraid doing so would incentivize players to not reinforce teammates just to get 5 stars, which could make things a bit less fun. So, a squad must clear the entire map and successfully extract within 30 minutes to receive a perfect score. This is supposed to be hard. Receiving 5 stars on a mission shouldn't be a walk in the park, nor should it be the usual outcome. Achieving a perfect operation, meaning 3 5-star missions, should be really challenging and a big accomplishment for players. Now, I've referred to rank and ranking or climbing the ranks a few times throughout this video, but what do I actually mean by that? Well, the stars accumulated at the end of a special operation would affect you and your squad mate's current rank. To achieve a higher rank, you need to continuously achieve a high score, but if you do poorly during a special operation, your rank will be brought down as a result. As you climb into the highest ranks, you'll need to achieve a near perfect score on every special operation to maintain your position at the top. I have a rough idea of how rank would be calculated, but this is by no means a perfect system. But either way, I'm going to get into that now. For each special operation a player completes, the number of stars earned would be divided by the total possible stars, which is 15. So if a player and their squad achieves 12 stars on a special operation, this number would be 0.8. This value would be taken from the last 10 SOs of a player, and an average would be created, which would represent that player's rank. For example, if a player got 12 stars on 9 SOs but failed 1 SO, the average would be 9 times 0.8, which is the equivalent of 12 stars, plus 0 for the 1 failed SO, divided by 10 for the total number of SOs that player completed. Meaning, that player's rank would be 0.72, with the maximum possible rank being 1.0 and requiring the player to get 15 stars on 10 consecutive operations, which should be very rare. I know Helldivers aren't typically big on math, so if this explanation was confusing, all players need to know is they need to increase the average amount of stars they get per special operation in order to increase their rank. On the other hand, if that average score goes down, so will the player's rank. Now, I'm not sure if this step is completely necessary, but I'm just covering all my bases. So I have the idea of players completing placement operations to get an initial rank. This may not be completely necessary, but Just in case it might actually matter, I think players may need to complete several placement operations to get an initial rank. I've just said, kind of as an arbitrary number, 3 placement operations to get an initial rank. So with 3 placement operations, the maximum initial rank a player could have would be 0.3, which isn't great, but I think starting players off at a low rank is fine, just because they'll inevitably either climb the ranks or keep a low rank if that's all they're really capable of. So what form would these ranks take? To be honest, I haven't really gotten that far. I think it would be cool if a player's rank took the form of a cool title for their Helldiver, but I could see the developers not wanting to do this since titles are sold within war bonds, and players would likely prefer to display their rank over a title from a microtransaction in most cases. I still really like this idea though. At low ranks, the title could be something kind of demeaning like Grunt or New Recruit. But for high ranks, it could be something cool like Liberty's Finest or Special Operations Expert. And for the really high-ranking players, John Helldiver. I'm only kinda kidding. Another option is capes. It would be super cool if you received a cape that changed in design to reflect your current rank. I could see a lot of players preferring this over a title, but personally, I'd be a little annoyed if my current rank's cape design just didn't match my preferred armor, especially if I was already a high rank. This isn't even a feature in the game, and I can already see this would be like a pet peeve for me, so I prefer the idea of titles being the way of displaying your rank more, and I think it would honestly suit the role of ranks better anyways, because players aren't going to notice a cape as often as they are the title, because the title's actually shown within the game's UI, rather than just on the player's back when players are constantly running around and far apart from each other. But beyond titles and capes, I'm not sure what the best way for a player's rank to be displayed would be. But it could always just be displayed separately from everything else, as long as it's visible and lets other people know how good you are at the game. Speaking of seeing how good other people are at the game, a leaderboard would be cool. Even Helldivers 1 had a leaderboard, although that one wasn't taken very seriously due to players abusing mechanics to reach the top rather than just actually playing the game well. I think a leaderboard showing the top ranked players would be pretty cool, and while they're at it, maybe another leaderboard showing players who have contributed the most points toward planet liberation. Maybe each planet could have its own liberation leaderboard. Speaking of aiding in the galactic war, how would special operations tie in? Well, with special operations being the most challenging way to play the game, I think it's only fair if good performance during a special operation would result in pretty hefty contribution to a planet's liberation. Maybe 50% more than a standard max difficulty mission. So, special operations. I think they could be a way of bringing some competition to the Helldivers 2 community, as well as being an endgame form of progression for avid players. While competitive modes in games are often associated with toxicity and animosity between players, with Helldivers 2's co-op experience, I think a competitive mode could actually bring players together, since a successful mission is dependent on a squad's ability to work effectively as a team. Special operations could also push players to fight factions that they'd otherwise avoid and dive on planets that they'd otherwise never visit. On top of that, I think this idea would push players to work together more than they otherwise would in standard missions, and could result in some really cool new strategies forming within the community, with an emphasis on team play and cooperation. I don't expect for Helldivers 2's developers to add special operations into the game. If they did add a competitive mode, it probably wouldn't be exactly like this, and this is if they were to ever add a competitive mode at all. My intention with making this video was to propose how a competitive mode within Helldivers 2 could work, and to gauge if it's something the community would be interested in. So let me know what you think of special operations. Do you think a more competitive mode would fit within Helldivers 2? Do you have your own ideas of what a competitive mode could look like within this game? Regardless, I'm very interested to hear what others think in the comments, and I appreciate you watching the video. Happy diving!